and welcome to Scary Tales. And this channel is dedicated to just telling real life chilling tales from real life encounters, experiences from real life people. So, I'd like to start today's first episode ever with my own experience. Now, I will say ahead of time that I've never had any experiences in any other place other than this place and this one time in my life, but it was enough to make me a believer in the paranormal. I never discount what people say just because I had my own experiences with this in the past. I've lived in several different places since we've lived at this place, but I've never had anything like this ever happen to me before. So go ahead and sit back and relax as much as you can and listen to my tale. It's my honor to tell you. So I want to give a little bit of backstory, first of all. Now, the place I grew up in is a place called Austin, Pennsylvania. Now, Austin, Pennsylvania is a very small town. This was it back in the late 1800s, maybe even the early 1900s, I'm not quite sure. But it used to be one of the largest logging towns, period. Just one of the largest logging towns in the United States. Now, what happened is they had built a dam there. They built a dam, and they said that the dam was unbreakable. It was known as the dam that couldn't break. That's what they had said. And, it's awful funny that they did say that, because what ended up happening, you can only guess. It broke. Now, when it broke, it wiped out a majority of the town. I want to say almost all of the town. Not all of it, but only maybe a handful of places even survived. This is a picture of the dam today. And there was a giant paper mill there. Now, that paper mill was pretty much the lifeblood of the entire town. Now, once that got taken out, the town basically went into shambles. There's only probably 1,000 people there today. There's still some of the homes that survived, very few. But I happen to live in one of those homes. And, yeah. I don't have good stories. Wish I could report that they were happy memories, but almost every memory in that house was absolutely horrifying. Now, it didn't start out that way, but let me go ahead and give you a little bit of backstory. The house we lived in sat along the main road, 872. It looked actually an awful lot like this house right here. Just if you would take this house and you would flip the front of it to face the road. And in the back we had some chickens and a log pile, a couple dog houses, and then there was a creek that ran through it. So there was nothing back there, just the backyard, and that's it. And it would start out where we would hear random noises, just random stuff. And it all started when we found these toys. So my room was towards the back of the house. If you went in to the front of the house and you looked straight, there's a set of stairs and they went straight up. Now, if you went up these stairs, you had to go through a bathroom, the only bathroom in the house, and then behind that bathroom was my bedroom. My bedroom was pretty big, honestly. For a kid my age, it was extremely large. But in the back of my bedroom, there was an open closet door. It didn't have a door on it, just a doorway. And oddly, for some reason, at the base of at the floor level, there was a small window about yay big, I'd say. Probably a foot or so wide, maybe 6-8 inches tall, that looked out over the backyard. And I remember I was on down there looking out of it, and one of the floorboards kind of was loose. And when I pushed it, it came up. And when it did, I thought I saw something. I looked down there, and I pull out this toy. And it was a little wooden duck. Had wheels on it. A little screw in the front, a little small rope on it. Pull it around. I don't know why it was there. But I wish I never found that toy. Because what happened after is, quite honestly, it's horrifying. It actually gave me trouble for a long time. I, couldn't sleep without a light on until well into my 20s. And I'll tell you exactly why. It started off, like I said, with just some random stuff. It'd be me and my mom. We'd be out on the front porch. We like to listen to the rain. When it would storm, we would listen to the rain and things like that. Or we would just sit out there and just enjoy being outside. Things we don't really, not a lot of people do anymore. But there was one night, very in particular, that I remember very clearly. We were sitting on the swing, and my mom said, "Hold on a second, wait, you hear that?" And I was like, "No, I don't hear anything. What?" And I started to, "Oh yeah, I think I do." And it sounded like a horse and carriage pulling up, just randomly. And I'm like, "What the heck?" And then it sounded like someone shut a door or opened a door, one of the two, and then you hear a bunch of people talking, just randomly talking. Couldn't quite understand what they were saying, but it was a definite conversation between people. And my mom and I got up and we looked out there and we turned and we looked and nothing. There's nobody back. There's literally nobody back there. It's just chickens and dog houses and stuff. We're like, what the heck? So it was kind of stuff like that at first, but then it started getting a little bit more weird. I remember I had this toy, my favorite toy, which was I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan when I was a kid. I'm an early 80s baby, so I remember I had this Ninja Turtles toy. It was a warthog called Bebop. And that thing was my favorite toy. I took it everywhere with me, made sure I always had it, always knew where it was. I always had it with me. Well, one day, it just came up missing. And did you bring it over to, your cousin's house? Did you bring it over here? Did you bring it over there? Did you take it to church? Did you, whatever? And, I just kept on saying, no, I didn't. I didn't. I don't know where it's at. I have no clue. But one day, I don't know, maybe a week later, a little bit more, give or take a day or two, I guess, it was in the fish tank. Just randomly in the fish tank. I'm like, what? Reached in there, got it. And things like this would happen often. Only with that toy, I would find it in crazy places. I'd find it on the top of a windowsill. I remember finding it one time. I remember finding it outside at the log pile, thinking, oh, did I leave this here? I don't remember leaving it here. Just very odd places. Now, things started to get a little bit more sinister over time. I remember my sister told me that she saw red eyes outside of her window. I never experienced anything like that. Unfortunately, my experiences were much worse. But I remember one time specifically, I was laying in my parents' bedroom. Now, their room would have been here, and these two windows. Now, their bed was up against the back wall that would be towards that side of the house, and there was a doorway around this area here, around this area over here, but back towards the wall. And I had the door cracked slightly. I remember my grandmother was over. It was my parents and my grandmother downstairs. I remember laying there, and I started to, again, I just want to say ahead of time, again, the house is facing the road, and so I was very familiar with the different shadows and things like this that could be cast from traffic coming down the main road, because it was very close to the main road. Probably, I'd say, 20 feet. Now, I started to hear this sound. It started very, very, very quietly. And it was like a, but guttural almost, and more deep than that. I can't even make the sound that deep. And it started to grow. And I noticed as it started to grow, when I would try to move, I felt like I was like in this fog. Like I could not move. And I wasn't asleep yet. This wasn't sleep paralysis. I hadn't even fallen to sleep yet. And I heard this. And I remember seeing at the bottom corner of the wall opposite me, the shadow start to rise. Just slowly. At first it started as just a small shape, and it just rose and rose and rose and got bigger and bigger and bigger until it was a full form figure on the wall. And this sound is now penetrating, just whoa. And I'm like, how does no one else hear this? What is going on? You know, and I finally just burst, and it seemed like as soon as I could get my hand over the edge of the bed, boom, it all came back to me. I bolted downstairs. I told my mom, hey, this is crazy. This is what's going on. I really need, of course, I'll go back to bed. I'm going to go back to bed. But this is terrifying for me, and it's terrifying that no one's believing me, and I feel like I'm crazy, you know. I'm a child. I'm only 6 or 7 years old. So to have no one believe me, it was difficult, but it wouldn't be long until they started to have some experiences of their own. Now, I remember this one time. I was laying in my room, and I had my back turned away from the rest of the room, so my face was facing the wall. And again, up against my room is slanted, so it's got a slanted ceiling on one side. It's probably at a 30-degree angle or so, 40-degree angle, not quite a 45. And in the center of that wall, there is a small window that's probably only about, I would say, 2 foot wide by maybe a foot tall, not even a foot tall maybe. And it was old style that when you close it like this, it latches with a hook. Well, outside, on the side of the house, over here, over here, on the side of the house, down low, around this area, there were 2 chains. I believe those chains were there because it was an old farmhouse, and I believe they were there to hold cattle in place while they got vaccinations or worked on or whatever else needed to be done, slaughtered. I don't know. But again, I'm only 6 or 7, so I don't really know. I only remember what my dad had told me they were for. Well, one night I was sitting there, and I kept on thinking I would hear someone behind me or feel someone behind me. You know, it seemed like I'd turn around and I'd like someone take a step, and I'd flip back over and no one would be there. I hated my room. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. That's why I was in my parents' room to begin with, but after that experience, I felt like nowhere was safe. So I was in my room, and I heard those chains rattling. I thought, that's weird. I've never heard them rattle before, you know what I mean? So I go over and I look out, and they're very clearly just rattling together. And my dad even came into the room, and he was like, what the hell are you doing in here? Because I'd opened the window and he'd heard it. They weren't, at this point, they weren't hitting the house. They were rattling against each other. So it's just like, ching, 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 you know, a normal chain sound. Well, shortly after that, my dad turned around, and that's when I sensed something was wrong. I could just tell by the look on his face that something was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong. I had no idea. But he knew something was wrong. And shortly after that, he came back into the room with a Bible. I'll never forget, he had a Bible in his hand and he started to pray. And he prayed to me, and it seemed like that was, it was probably the word. Well, it didn't seem like it was going to say that, because the chains started to get louder, and now they're beating up against the house, and I'm terrified. First of all, I have no idea why my dad leaves the room, comes into the Bible, and starts praying. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. So that alone is scaring me, because I'm like, what are we even praying for? My dad's praying about rebuking Satan. And I remember as soon as he said, we rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ, those chains start to get loud. And they're beating up against the house now. And my dad just keeps repeating, we rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ. We rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ. And I remember they get louder and louder and louder and louder, and they're just bashing against each other, and they're just beating the house at this point, and it's just thundering through the house. To the point to where it's deafening almost. And my dad puts the Bible up against the wall of the house on the side of the right below the window, and says, we rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ. And it just goes boom, one huge crash, and it's done. Now, I didn't understand the significance of why my dad was upset at the time, but it wasn't until years later that he would recount this story and tell me that what made him think something was crazy in the first place, or was out of place, is there was no wind. There was no wind. And these were heavy logging chains. Shortly after that, probably a few months after that, maybe a year, was the first time I saw it, what I called the monster, the entity. My friend had a friend named Marianne, and Marianne had a daughter named Christina, and Christina would come over and play, and we would just do random things. We'd, play outside with the dogs, run around, play tag, play hide and seek, and one of these days, one of our games led us to the basement. And just to describe the basement for you temporarily, you walked in, it was a dirt basement, dirt floor. There was only a single light hanging, it was a bulb hanging from a chain, and it had a pull string on it. The room was probably about 12, maybe 15 foot by 20 foot, maybe. And then the rest of the house, towards the front of the house, was a crawl space, a very small crawl space at that. And again, this is all dirt. It's not very well illuminated back there. But I'll never forget, we went down there. I think maybe I was showing her the boiler or something, to be honest with you. I don't even remember what we were doing down there. I don't think we were playing anything. I think I just went down there. I may have even went down there just to try to scare her, to be honest with you, like as a joke, as a kid, which is, it was a bad idea, because I'll never forget, she started screaming, and it startled me. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And I, instinctually turn around, and that's when I saw it. A figure that had its, I can't even do what it was doing, because it's such an unnatural posture. It had its arms back behind it, but its head was forward, upright, facing me, with its back facing, or its stomach facing the ceiling is what it seemed to be, but I could only see the very front of it. And it had no face. It was gray in color. Ugh. It freaks me out even recounting this stuff, to be honest with you. It was just gray, and I only caught a glimpse of it for maybe a quarter of a second before I snapped, and I immediately run and I try to grab for the door handle, but as I do, it is so cold that I thought it was hot. And I immediately pulled away. Ow! But as soon as I did that, my fear was so intense that I said, you know what, I don't even care. And I went and I grabbed it again. Nothing. It wasn't hot, wasn't cold, wasn't nothing. I pulled it, opened the door, and we both ran out. And we were actually so terrified of that place, of that circumstance, I'm sorry, that Christina actually ended up not being able to be consoled, and they had to leave. Her mom had to take her home because she was so damaged by that, and she wouldn't come over anymore after that. She did not come back over at all after that instance, and she used to come over all the time. If they came over, Christina didn't come. If Marianne came, Christina didn't come at all, ever. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about the worst thing. This was the final straw for all of us. And that is when I, again, had my Bebop toy. I was walking down the steps, and I remember looking at the Bebop toy as I'm walking. And I was at maybe the second step. And I remember very clearly, to this day, I can remember it 32 years later or something, 31 years later, as clear as if it happened just moments ago. I felt two handprints just go boom, not push and shove, push and pull back, boom, and I went flying. I didn't tumble down the steps. I flew to the bottom of the steps. I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. My mother was on the couch, and she said, I never hit a single step. That is what, and when I told her what happened, obviously, and I told my dad, at this point, they had had enough experiences themselves, which I may tell some of those experiences in other episodes, but they had such horrifying experiences themselves privately that they didn't even share with me, that when that happened, they were like, that's it. That we gotta go. It was so serious that just maybe a month or 2, 3 months after that, something, my parents just decided, we're moving. I'm not going to stay in this house any longer. We can't do this. And we left and actually went and moved to a whole other town called Lock Haven. It's right out of State College, Pennsylvania. And they just let the house go into foreclosure. They didn't even make payments. They didn't care about anything. Their number one priority was, we gotta go. No one else would buy that house because of the stories that surrounded it. And my dad actually got it for only about, I think, like $9,000 because of the stories before it. And when it went into foreclosure, the bank burned it to the ground. They just burned it to the ground. To this very day, it's an empty lot. No one has anything built there. It's literally just house, empty lot, house. No one wants anything to do with that property. They even say, I wasn't around, but they even say in the town, because it's a very small town, I know most of the residents there, that when they burned the house, there was almost no smoke. They said it was so odd because it was almost a smokeless fire. Yet, a house that old, that big, to me that seems crazy. But, again, I just want to say thank you guys for stopping in. That's my story. That's the first of many to come. I have other stories from other people that I'm going to put on here. I do want to just go ahead and share a couple of these pictures of what Austin looks like after the flood. Looked like after the flood. This one here was right after the flood. So it took out significant part. And here is the paper mill as it stands today. I'll back out of the frame here for just a second. That's how it stands today. And it's just the whole town is just, it's an old place. And I unfortunately had to live in one of those places. But, like I said, I've never had any experiences afterward. So I guess it wasn't something that was tied to me or to any of us. It was just that house, man. But that's what has me a believer, and that's what has me dedicated to this channel. I want to thank everyone one more time for stopping by. I'm going to try to post on Mondays and Thursdays. Those are my days off. So if you liked today's story and you want to hear more, go ahead, drop a like, drop us a follow. We'll see you next time. God bless.
Artlist.io